So our expert speakers, our valued guests, and the doctors who are attending webcast at different locations like Allahabad, Dehradun, Ambala and Jaipur, a very warm welcome on behalf of Procter & Gamble Health. So intent of this meeting is to discuss lot of challenging cases which are faced in our routine clinical practice, and to specially bring together two different specialities like pediatricians and ENT surgeons to discuss on the various issues related to pediatric nasal disorder. And to do that, we have two expert speakers for today's session. It's my privilege to introduce our first speaker, Dr. P.D. Garg. Good evening, Doctor. Doctor is a consultant pediatrician with more than 41 years of experience, and right now he is practicing at Vallabhbhai Patel Chest Institute and Max Super Speciality Hospital at Ghaziabad. And today's topic that sir is going to cover is very interesting, that is neonatal nasal obstruction, which is a little bit a different topic. It's my privilege to introduce our second speaker, Dr. Sharad Maheshwari. Doctor is a senior consultant at ENT Eye Hospital in Krishnanagar and also associated with Max Super Speciality Hospital, Delhi. He has more than 30 years of experience and he is an expert in tracheal endoscopic surgery, advanced micro-ear surgeries and cochlear implant surgery. His special areas of interest are laser ENT surgeries and endoscopic skull base surgery. Welcome you, sir. So without wasting much of the time, I now invite Dr. Garg to come on the stage and begin the first presentation. Welcome you, sir.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, I like to welcome all of you for sparing your valuable time on this festival season where everyone is busy in festivities and socialization. Secondly, I like to thank organizers for giving me opportunity to speak before Dr. Sharad Maheshwari, who is a seasoned speaker and has given talks at national and international lab forums. Third, in my introduction, I am told that I am associated with some Vallabhbhai Patel Chest Institute. I think it is copy and pasting mistake. I am associated with Holy Child Nursing Home, which is a pediatric hospital. And the best part of today's talk is that they have allotted me 45 minutes, but I am it's such that they cannot afford a nose blocked nose. So they have to have a clear nose. And most important, it is associated with high morbidity and mortality if not taken care at proper time. Obstruction can cause variety of difficulties of varying degrees. They may have mild problems, they may have severe problems, poor sleep, even adults cannot sleep with blocked nose, but since they are the nose breather, so it is very difficult for them to have a good sleep. Poor feeding. As I told you, the technique is such that they cannot afford to have a blocked nose. Excessive cry when he cannot take meal, he cannot take milk, he is going to cry inconsistently. Strater, it is like deep snoring. Strater during inspiration, we all know. Apnea, tachypnea, retraction of chest, especially suprasternal retraction. Rhinorrhea, cyanosis which is relieved by crying. Whereas in all respiratory and cardiac conditions, this cyanosis increases with crying, and it is here because he opens mouth and he is able to breathe properly, so this cyanosis is relieved. Epistaxis, slightly rare thing. Poor weight gain, yes, when he is not sleeping, he is not feeding, then he is bound to have lose weight, or he is not bound, he is not going to gain weight properly, but we expect 200 gram per day, Sunday holiday. Depends on, this symptomatology problems depends on whether the lesion or problem is unilateral or bilateral. And if it is unilateral, then we usually get diagnosis at when he has first time respiratory infection. This can be life-threatening. That's why it is important if not taken care at a proper time. As far as causes can be congenital as well as acquired. This pyriform nasal stenosis, which is the anterior nasal aperture, it is bony in nature. Choanal atresia, Dacrocystocele, septal deviation, Charge syndrome, Treacher-Collins syndrome, Kallmann syndrome, water anomaly, Pfeiffer anomaly, nasopharyngeal teratoma, pharyngeal wall collapse, all dysmorphism involving face, ear, nose, or throat, or any facial dysmorphism can have, or most of the time they have, nasal obstructions. If we take pyriform nasal stenosis, this is anterior inlet of pyriform aperture, narrowest part of nasal cavity. This is associated with other malformations, holoprosencephaly, hypopituitarium, cardiac and urogenital malformations. If we are able to pass, a nasal catheter beyond 30-32 millimeter, then you can definitely exclude pyriform nasal stenosis or even choanal atresia. Management is surgical, there is no role of any medicine, and anterior sublabial approach is usually taken, and I think Dr. Maharshi will be able to tell which is there any some development in approach, because nowadays we have fiber optic bronchoscope and otoscope, so they can go through that also. Choanal atresia, most talked about anomaly, which in fact in the beginning we were told, or we were familiar with this condition more than anything else, that this is the posterior nasal aperture of internal nair is one of the two openings found at the back of the nasal passage. This is the persistence of buccopharyngeal membrane or failure of oronasal membrane to rupture. Quite uncommon, 5,000 to 1 in 1, 5,000 to 8,000 births. It is usually osseous, but sometimes it is membranous also. Usually unilateral, but in up to 30% of cases, it is bilateral. It has got female preponderance. Again, if you can pass with nasal cannula of 5 to 6 gauge beyond 30 to 35 millimeter, then you can rule out the diagnosis of choanal atresia. As far as management concerned, secure airway, oropharyngeal airway, which is used by the anesthetist or which is used in nursery, is enough to relieve this obstruction and give him relief while we are investigating and planning to treat the child. And treatment is by surgery only. Few children, if it is just stenosis, not the complete atresia, then few children can outgrow with this problem. Charge syndrome, there are very many syndromes which are associated with nasal obstruction, and we will be taking few of them only because there is a very long list of syndromes. This is the most common Charge syndrome, as name suggests. It has got coloboma, heart defect, atresia coine, restriction of growth, genital abnormalities, and ear anomalies. This is also associated with polydactyly, facial, nasal, and palatal defects, tracheoesophageal fistula, and craniosuture. Every child is not going to have all these anomalies, but some of them will be anomaly, and they are genetically positioned in their genes. We have to refer to ENT surgeon. In not only ENT surgeon, this will need multi-specialty management. So, but out of all these, because of child is going to have problem in early stage only, and that will be mostly respiratory and feeding problems. So it is the ENT surgeon who is the called first. CT scan is done to confirm the diagnosis and to exclude other anomalies that because they are usually associated with other anomalies. You can plan it out by just relieving initially by airway. And another most common, though rare but still common, Treacher-Collins syndrome. This is mandibulofacial dysostosis. Franz-Strattis syndrome. This is autosomal dominant pattern. Downward slopy palpebral fissure as we see in Mongol. Coloboma of lower eyelid. Shrunken cheekbones. Blind fistula opening between the angle of mouth and ears. Deformed pinnae. Atypical hair growth. Receding chin. Abnormalities of ear and deafness. Mandible is hypoplastic. Treatment is multidisciplinary. Kalman syndrome, one of the hypogonadotropic hypogonadism. Autosomal recessive again, characterized by anosmia, though newborn will be not able to make it out, but if they outgrow, then you can have this problem. Anosmia, cleft palate, hypertelorism, sensory neural hearing loss, unilateral renal aplasia, oligodontia, choanal atresia again, and many more facial defects. Up here I want to mention again that all children don't have all problems. They will have 2 or 3 or 4 problems only. There are a few more rare conditions. Water association, as the name stands, water is for vertebral, anal, tracheoesophageal fistula, and renal anomalies. There is one more, Pfeiffer syndrome. This is again craniofacial abnormalities, autosomal dominant, abnormal shape of skull, microcephaly. They will be having widely spaced thumb and great toe, which are short and broad, maybe syndactyly also. They will be having respiratory problem, deviated nasal septum, choanal atresia, and will be having disorders of speech. And some mechanical, these were genetic, and this is the some solid organ defect. The nasolacrimal duct cyst, lacrimal duct imperforation, so you will be having epiphorals along with this. Small cyst with fluid in, if the obstruction is in the inferior part, the cyst will bulge into the nasal cavity under the inferior turbinate bone. Endoscope is simple to treat by ENT surgeon, endoscopic marsupialization, and usually there is no recurrence. Nasal meningocele, meningeal hernia through base of skull into nasal cavity, contains only CSF. Again, treatment is by surgery and quite easy to operate. Meningoencephalocele, no functional cerebral parenchyma, only ectopic glial tissue is there. Fibrous cord, no CSF in it. And this can be managed by ENT surgeon or sometime neurosurgeon also. Vaccinate against meningococci at the earliest so that they don't develop meningitis. Management is surgical only, there is no medical management. You can have teratomage, hemangiomage, septal deviation rarely troublesome. That is usually positional in the bomb, so they outgrow it, and if there is definite septal deviation, even then they can outgrow with that problem, or we have ENT specialists with us to take care of that, and that is usually not life threatening. In acquired cases, obstetric trauma is the most common, in which there is a septal deviation, which is well tolerated if it is there. Rapid resolution due to the plasticity. Nasal rhinitis, you will be hearing it after my talk. And infective, there can be abscess also, which may start with viral and then it may become purulent. Chlamydia acquired from the infected birth canal, and it responds to macrolides very well. Congenital syphilis, which is now quite uncommon again, which is diagnosed by serology, PCR. Osteochondritis of the nasal bone because of some infection, or even tuberculosis can be there, but that will be seen afterward, not in the neonatal stage. And cow's milk allergy, these are even people say that cystic fibrosis sometimes leads to, because of defective ciliary function, they can have nose blocks. Foreign body is really rare at this stage because child itself could not do anything, he cannot manage anything, but this brother, sister or other siblings can put something in the nose. Nasal cannula and CPAP pressure, because CPAP gives lot of pressure at the nose, and if it is used for a quite long time, or if it is not managed properly, it can lead to injury to nostrils, and then again in nasal passage also. To diagnose, you as always take a good history, you need a good history examination just to look for the severity of the problem. There can be simply mucosal edema if you have tried a lot for during passing of cannula, then you can have nasal mucosal edema. Suction should be done quite gently, otherwise they are very soft, they are very tender, and this will lead to injury. Nasal drops, we usually advise normally saline drops, but in some cases you can have other drops also, which leads to decongestant drops. Try to look for etiology, and in that it is not sufficient to diagnose choanal atresia or any other obstruction, because most of the time they are associated with some other congenital anomalies. So please don't rest after just diagnosing that there is a nasal block because of this problem. They may be having other problems also, so please look for that. Observe the dysmorphic appearance. Counseling is needed because many a time it is the multidisciplinary management, and in which you will be requiring neurosurgeon, speech therapist, audiometrist, pedodontist, and genetic expert. In summary, breathing and feeding are affected rather than anything. They will not have any fever, they will not have any other thing, they may not have even cough. So breathing is affected. In the early days can lead to cyanosis and respiratory failure. The causes are a long list, but the top few are the common. Many other abnormalities and conditions are associated. This is the take-home message. that nasal obstruction, most of the children will be having definitely some or other problem. So please look for those problems, and you will if you look for them, you will definitely find them. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Garg, to enlighten us some of the rare conditions, but though very important considering they are life-threatening. But however, at the other spectrum, allergic rhinitis is very, very common, especially considering the pollution in Delhi. And to cover that topic, I would like to request the expert ENT surgeon Dr. Maheshwari to come on the stage and discuss some challenges with respect to allergic rhinitis. Over to you, sir.
Procter & Gamble to give me a chance to interact. Second, my senior Dr. P.D. Garg, he has spoken very good words for me, but it's very different that a senior when speak for you, you are more threatened that whether you will be able to go up to the mark or not. But I am thankful to Dr. P.D. Garg. Thankful to you all for giving me the opportunity to interact. I say it interaction because allergic rhinitis is already being talked a lot many times, and you must have listened a lot many times the allergic rhinitis. But it is also a very boring subject because it is more of the theoretical. But still, when we go in the retrospect, we see that the patients in their day-to-day routine, and when the patient in day-to-day routine, when they are working, it is not the problem if we say that I am not feeling well, but the other people don't realize it, because patient is looking normal, everything is normal, fever, no fever, nothing, but still his working capacity or work, day-to-day working, it is hampered. Allergic rhinitis certainly hampers the working, and that's why it leads to the man-hour loss. And if people estimated it, it's a very huge number. The man-hour loss per day or in the year is too much. And only reason simple, allergic rhinitis. Patient looking good but feeling ill. And the second very important thing is still we are going in the details, research is going on, a lot many researchers are working on it, but overall the things come to again the same. The complications which are leading from the allergic rhinitis, they are also being difficult to manage, or if managed, a lot many people have the recurrence or the problems. So it is important that we must discuss from time to time the allergic rhinitis and try to come to a consensus or modality of the treatment or the protocol. If we see, about 20 to 30% of the Indian population suffers from at least one allergic disease annually, and most allergy prevalence diseases in India affect between 10 to 30% of all adults, but it is also very much common nowadays in the pediatric age group of patients. So as the pediatricians are also there, they are having also very good and very high number of the pediatric patients which are having the allergic rhinitis or problem of the cold, and it is increasing. When we came in the practice about 30 years before, at that time we came from the state, and we used to see the more number of patients of the chronic suppurative otitis media or acute otitis media and like that. But gradually it is changing the trend, and allergic rhinitis or the sinus problems or the nasal problems were less at that time. But it is now reversing. The chronic suppurative otitis media incidence are going down, and the allergic rhinitis and the sinus problems are going up. Why? It is a very, very important thing is the pollution, one thing, and second is awareness, more awareness of the patient because of the education. So, whenever there is a little bit of infection or the pain in the ear or like this, the patient immediately reach to the doctor and get the treatment. So, the things in the diseases of the ear are getting down, but the diseases of the sinus and the allergic rhinitis are increasing, and pollution is one of the very, very important contributory factor all over in the metropolitans, but also now it is going in the other suburban towns or the medium cities. So, if we see the classification of rhinitis causation in children, the allergic rhinitis in the neonates or very early age of the pediatric patients is less, but as the patient goes toward the adolescence, it increases and the symptoms are more prominent gradually and gradually. Why this is so? Because it is an immunity problem, and exposure to an allergen, gradually patient is sensitized toward the allergen and he increases, the symptoms are increasing and the patient is getting allergy more. So, when the patient is neonate, there is no allergen sensitivity or everything, but with in the atmosphere or the environment, it happens even in the house where the carpets are there or the curtains are there and like that. In the infectious rhinitis is almost same throughout, and it may lead to the secondary infection after the allergic rhinitis. And non-allergic or non-infectious rhinitis, because of the GERD or the hormonal or drug induced neurogenic this is in the older children and it happens. It is also the same, but we have seen that the allergic rhinitis from the preschool to adolescent it increases. So, basically what is allergic rhinitis? So, broadly defined, it is the inflammation of the nasal mucosa, and the nasal mucosa on the lateral wall mostly, not on the septum, the nasal wall of the lateral nasal wall. So, the mucosa of the lateral nasal wall and on the turbinates, it is the most common which is being inflamed, and this inflammation leads to the symptoms, and these symptoms are they basically giving trouble to the patient or the patient feel ill, and it is system. Some of the time now the consensus is there between the chest physicians and the ENT surgeons about the area guidelines that allergic rhinitis and its impact on asthma, or if we say many patients of the asthma will have the allergic rhinitis and many patients of the allergic rhinitis will have the asthma. So, it is a systemic disease because the nasal mucosa of the airway from the nose to the trachea or the bronchi is the same. So, it may be a systemic disease, some of the time the other disease also, but mainly allergic rhinitis is on the airway, and its genetic problems may be also there, and immunologic produce atopic individuals who produce immunoglobulins to allergens such as pollen, house dust mite, animal dander and molds. But now with the changing time and with the increasing pollution, and the allergic rhinitis is also very much increased even in the atopic individuals as well as others. So, if we say that allergic rhinitis, to whom we say allergic rhinitis and how much severity and everything, for that the classification has been made. When we were studying in the medical college at that time, there was allergic rhinitis was very small topic, and mainly it was the vasomotor rhinitis. But you will surprised to know that since last few years, the vasomotor rhinitis topic has been withdrawn from the textbooks. There is no vasomotor rhinitis mentioned in that, and the classification has been changed to the allergic rhinitis and the non-allergic rhinitis. And previously when we were in the college, we used to see the patients being operated for the Vedian neurectomy by our senior surgeons and all without endoscope. At that time endoscope was not there, but now with the even endoscope it is easier, but it is not being done. So they are the changing pattern and modalities of the management of the allergic rhinitis. So it can be classified in intermittent, where the symptoms are less than 4 days per week or less than 4 consecutive weeks, and persistence when the symptoms are more than 4 days per week and or more than 4 consecutive weeks, and mild and moderate severe. So this classification almost gives us the intermittent, moderate severe or the mild persistent, like that. It all can be together, intermittent and mild also, or intermittent and moderate to severe also. Severity is also mentioned, and persistence or the duration, intermittent and persistent, is mentioned also. Then there is a clinical difference between allergic rhinitis patients. As pediatricians are there, so we are discussing more for the pediatric patients. There are sneezers and runners, and there are blockers. Who are the sneezers and runners? Sneezing, rhinorrhea, itching, nasal block, diurnal rhythm and conjunctivitis. These are the symptoms mainly in the allergic rhinitis, and mainly 4 symptoms, which is sneezing, rhinorrhea, itching and nasal blockage. These are the main 4 symptoms, but some of the time it may be changed with the diurnal rhythm or conjunctivitis, or the ophthalmic symptoms also. The patient is having itching in the eyes. So sneezers and runners are mainly paroxysmal, watery, anterior and posterior watery discharge, itching is yes, nasal blockage is variable, worse during the day and improve at the night, and conjunctivitis is often present. But in the blockers, no sneezing or little sneezing, thick mucus or mucopus after the secondary infection takes place, and more posterior. No itching. In the blocker there is no itching. Its nasal blockage is often severe, hence patient is more problematic with the senior, with the nasal blockage. Constant day and night may be worse at night. When patient lie down, it is more worse. So this is the pathophysiology you must have seen in all of your discussions and talks and everywhere. And basic thing is that the beta cells are they produce Ig production, which attach to the mast cell, and when allergen exposure is there, so the IgE and these interact or act, and mast cell produces histamine, leukotrienes, platelet activity factors, interleukin 5, interleukin 4, and this in result lead to the symptoms of the allergic rhinitis. So this is the basic pathophysiology of this thing, but as Dr. Garg has discussed before, the nasal blockage in the neonates, he was speaking regarding neonates. So allergic rhinitis is very less in the neonates, but it increases gradually. So the basic diagnosis in the clinical practice, patient comes to you for the relief. I am not going to go in the detail of the research or this is theoretical this thing and theoretical that thing. Patient is there. Nowadays patients are having less patience and they want immediate relief or good relief. Otherwise next day they will again come, doctor, patient is having, my child is still having the trouble. So we have to give the relief, and for that the management, proper management, we have to understand and we have to give without causing any problem to the patient. So most common is the history, physical examination. That is the most common which you can do immediately in the clinic, and majority of the time you come to a conclusion of the diagnosis. History taking is very important, and if you see the signs of atopy or the recurrent persistent rhinitis, personal history taking is congestion, nasal itch, rhinorrhea, sneezing, itching in the eye, seasonability and trigger. These things have to be asked for the patient in quick manner, and As soon as we discuss these things, we come to know patient says it is 3-4 days, he is having sneezing and nasal itching and clears his nose regularly, itching in the eyes. Our diagnosis immediately goes towards, it is not the acute infective pathology, it is more of the allergic rhinitis. Then we can ask about the family allergy and asthma. So again, the allergic rhinitis causes 4 main symptoms, that are congestion, itching, rhinorrhea, blocking and sneezing, like that. And our patient or the parents want the relief from those problems immediately, rest management later on. Then we can ask the family history about allergy and asthma. We can ask even for the child also regarding the breathlessness. Then environmental conditions, pollens, animals, flooring or upholstery, carpet and the things. I can give you one example there. When I was in the medical college, in the hostel, we put one मेज पोस्ट लगा दिया जी हमने टेबल पे. Then the books, and in the hostel you are very lazy, or you can say busy or whatever they think, so you don't clean your tables. Every day when after 2-3 months when I used to sit on the table to study, 2-4 पर्चे किताब के बदले और sneezing start and cold and so what was the reason? Then I came to the conclusion that it is because of the dust mite which is settled there on the mage post or the books. So I removed the mage post. Wooden table is good, and you have to clean the books properly. Nowadays you are having the facility of the vacuum cleaner. That is certainly vacuum cleaner is more effective at this place. So environmental conditions, we have to take care of the flooring, upholstery or the curtains like. Then medication also causes some of the time, but the ACE inhibitors and beta blockers or the calcium channel blocker drugs, they cause more allergy in the throat. So cough without any infection, not violent, but slight cough is there always because of these drugs. Then other comorbidities we have to inquire about from the patient's family. Asthma, mouth breathing, snoring. Mouth breathing is very, very important because in a number of patients where the adenoid blockage is there, or the inferior terminate hypertrophy is there, or some other problem may, like that Dr. Garg has told regarding the meningocele or meningoencephalocele or the choanal atresia, like that. But this is a very important history. Snoring and apnea. Nowadays patients are very parents are very thing, and you see with a good cameras, cell phones you are having. So patient brings you the video of the sleeping child about the breathlessness, or in drawing of the giphisternum, or in the nose, supraesternal notch. So that gives you the idea how much is the blockage of the airway is there. So that is very, very important, and patients are some of the time very educated nowadays, so they give you, Doctor साहब बच्चे को ऐसा दिक्कत हो रहा है, and then you come to the conclusion it may be allergic rhinitis, but other comorbidities must be sought after. Sinus involvement is very, very rare in the children because the frontal sinus is not developed in the neonates, or that later on with the age it goes. Other sinuses are also small, but a number of times you see the patient with the puffy eyes and slight edema on both the sides of the nasal dorsum. That is because of the acute ethmoiditis. So in the pediatric age group of patients, sinusitis is there, acute ethmoiditis, and some of the time it is very, very you can say that very, very aggressive. So we have to take care of that, and we have to diagnose it first. So otherwise frontal sinusitis almost no. Maxillary sinusitis also very rare. Otitis media is certainly a very, very common thing because of the cold or the allergic rhinitis or the nose block. Patient do like this, and because of this goes behind in the nasopharynx, causing the edema of the eustachian tube opening and eustachian tube blockage and the acute otitis media. Nasal polyps are also very so not in the pediatric age group patients, but yes, some of the time in the adolescent children you may get the enterogonal polyp or like that. Conjunctivitis again, allergic rhinitis when happens there, the symptoms go through the nasolacrimal duct to the conjunctiva, and conjunctivitis may occur some of the time allergic or some of the time infective. Then response to previous interventions. Then other signs you must also observe during that short clinical examination of the patient: mouth breathing, rubbing the nose, transverse nasal crease, frequent sniffing or clearing of the throat, and allergic shyness, dark circles around the eyes because of the allergic rhinitis, chronic allergic rhinitis. Then nose, mucosal swelling or bleeding, pale thin secretions, polyps. So, here I will like to mention one thing, that when you examine the patient's nose, a lot of patients, mothers and comes, though doctor, the child is having polyp in the nose. It's 5-year-old child having the polyp in the nose. How? No, you could do like this and you see we have seen in. So, where is the polyp? This is the inferior turbinate for which the homeopathy doctors or the parent themselves understand that this is the polyp, but that is a normal structure. Because of the allergic rhinitis, it has swollen up. It is pale or bluish and congested and just shining. So, that is to be first clinical examination sign is the congestion of the inferior turbinate and hypertrophied inferior turbinates with a bluish vision. Nowadays new headlights have come, LED headlights. So, when you use the LED headlight, the colors are different. Previously the yellow headlights were there, so colors were different. So, it is more easy to diagnose with the LED headlight if we see the turbinates. Then again the ear, in which eustachian tube dysfunction and Valsalva maneuver in young children, it is difficult, but certainly fluid behind the drum you can identify by the otoscopy. Then palpation of the sinus signs, posterior oropharynx, postnasal drip, or the lymphoid hyperplasia of the posterior 1/3 of tongue or the posterior pharyngeal wall. So, number of time patients come, डॉक्टर साहब इसके गले के अंदर में दाने दाने हो गए. What? It is posterior pharyngeal wall there because of the chronic allergic secretions, postnasal drip, patient is having granulations there. Then chest and skin, all atopy signs. So, now the diagnosis if we go, choanal atresia, Dr. Garg has already mentioned and told us, and it is very important to do early intervention in this surgical, and with the advent of the 2.7 millimeter rigid endoscopes, the surgery is very much improved, the results are improved. But the main problem here is, it is not difficult to open it, it is more difficult to prevent the recurrence, and that is more important thing, because once you do, it can recur. So, you have to do some stenting or some silicone tubing etc. to prevent the recurrence. Immunodeficiency you have to understand, persistent mucous purulent discharge. Encapsulocele certainly you have to call Cocktry, and you may have to put some graft etc. even in the pediatric age group patient where meningoencephalocele is there. Adenoid hypertrophy, yes, in the because of the allergic rhinitis. Now, it is debatable whether the allergic rhinitis is because of adenoid or the adenoid are enlarged because of hypertrophic because of the allergic rhinitis, but certainly they have both are importance, and a number of time a child with this very severe adenoid hypertrophy even in the 2 years of age and very hypertrophic tonsils, the allergic rhinitis and all symptoms, it looks allergic rhinitis, but the problem is of the adenoid hypertrophy, and this blockage causes more secretion accumulation in the nose, and medicines are also not effective. So, we have to take care to diagnose if the tonsils are enlarged and all those we can get for X-ray done, and we can see conditions of the adenoids, or we can do the nasal endoscopy nowadays. Foreign body, in 4 year, 5 year, 3-year-old or 7-year-old patient, foreign body unilateral purulent discharge is to be differentiated from the allergic rhinitis. Rhinosinusitis, as I told you, more in the adolescents. Cystic fibrosis is a disease where bilateral nasal polyp, poor smell, chest symptoms, malabsorption, failure to thrive, these are things, and it is more of a systemic disease. Primary ciliary dyskinesis, CSF leakage. CSF rhinorrhea and pediatric age group patient is also very less, but yes, certainly in adult, and it looks like the clear secretions just like the allergic rhinitis. Coagulopathy, septal deviation. We are not going much in the detail of other things, but mainly sticking to the allergic rhinitis. So, the demonstration of allergic rhinitis, diagnosis, skin prick test, IgE estimation and all those things, we can estimate and we can go. Lately, there are a number of management things are there, and for the diagnosis, the skin prick test list is going increasing, but the problem is of the immunological management. Diagnosis, you made the allergic rhinitis, there is a diagnosis of the and house dust mite is causing the problem, और करेला खाने से हो रही है जी, आपको पपैया से हो रही है, but what is the management? So, we are still to reach a certain level of the management of the allergic rhinitis. Again, go to the treatment antihistaminic or anti-allergic or decongestant or Montelukast, but diagnosis is there, but management is still thing. So, skin prick test, allergic specific IgE test, non-allergen challenge test. Other immunoassay tests are there. They are not influenced by medication, while the skin tests are higher sensitivity. Not influenced by skin disease, it is immediate results are there, require expertise, cheaper. Does not require expertise, quality control, expensive. So, these are two things which are going on the research level. So, various methods we have seen, and most commonly the clinical examination and history taking, they are the most important for the diagnosis in the clinical practice. Specific patient where it is prolonging problems to the patient, we can go for the other test, allergic test or skin prick test and like this. There are other things which can be used to separate or distinguish between the allergic rhinitis and the non-allergic rhinitis. Now, I will like to go mainly for the management. If we go about 30 years before, type 1 antihistamines are there. Type 1 antihistamines are there, like tripolidine and chlorpheniramine maleate. They were the most common antihistaminic of which were being used. They are very potent, but they are having their own problems. There is side effect is the sedation. So, tripolidine and chlorpheniramine maleate are still there, available, and commercial brands are also available, but they have to be reserved for the acute symptomatic relief, because they are having this biggest problem is of the sedation, even in the child, even in the adult, like that. So, oral histamines, second generation are they, when then came cetirizine, loratadine, like that. Then third generation came levocetirizine, fexofenadine, and like that. So, we have to make a protocol in our clinical practice to give the management. It is not only that antihistamine is given and it is okay. We have to give according to the patient antihistaminic plus decongestants. To prevent the rhinorrhea, you have to use decongestant. To prevent the allergic reaction, we have to give antihistaminic, maybe first generation, second generation or third generation. It depends. For the acute symptoms, then you can go for the, even you can go acute allergic rhinitis attack plus acute otitis media and severe symptoms. In those type of cases, you can use the type first generation antihistamine, chlorpheniramine maleate and the tripolidine. They give immediate relief. Then you switch over. They also combinations with the pseudoephedrine is also there to prevent the rhinorrhea, and then you can switch over to other. One thing few years ago came the sodium chromoglycate, but not much of the results have been seen, so discontinued now almost. Then along with this, the third thing is the xylometazoline or oxymetazoline nasal decongestant nasal drops. For the relief of the acute symptoms, you have to give, put either like a spray or like drops. But it is important to understand that their use should not be for months or like that, because that may lead to the rhinitis medicamentosa. So, it is important that combination is to be given. If secondary infection, antibiotic may be required. And now, it is not like that you ask that why in allergic rhinitis antibiotic? Yes, it is required some of the time when the allergic rhinitis is prolonged 5, 7, 10 days and secondary infection took place to control that. Then you have to withdraw gradually. So, this is the thing. Lately, since now many years, the intranasal corticosteroids are also there, which are being used for the allergic rhinitis, and certainly it gives good relief, but not in the acute cases. In acute cases, you have to control, and then for the maintenance for the longer period, intranasal steroids are to be given, and most commonly used now is the fluticasone. It comes in different, but the one best was the budesonide, that is now withdrawn. It's not. Then combination of intranasal corticosteroid antihistaminic nasal spray. There is one thing, agilastine, that is anticholinergic, and that is also being used in the combination with the intranasal corticosteroids. But this problem is it's a very burning sensation in the nasal cavity, and for the acute it may be good, but not for the long term, because it causes a lot of burning. The nasal decongestant drops, as I had mentioned, oxymetazoline or xylometazoline is the drops which are to be used in the acute conditions or SOS later on. If required, patient can in the night, patient's nose blocked because of the allergic rhinitis, he can instill it, but it should not be used for the longer duration. Then lately the leukotriene receptor antagonist montelukast has come, and it started initially for the chest or the tracheal or bronchial allergies, tracheobronchial allergies, and in the chest the results were reported to be very good. Later on it has also come in the nasal allergic rhinitis and used. So, it is always better to give the montelukast along with the third generation oral antihistamines, but it is important. We have seen that a number of consultants, they write 5 days take antihistamine with montelukast, it is having no use. At least we must give for a longer period, then after 10 to 15 days action starts, and for a longer period when you give the montelukast, then it is beneficial. Then other subcutaneous immunotherapy, local nasal immunotherapy and all are there. Patient education, but above all, like the skin prick test people say, avoidance of allergens and pollutants. That is first and foremost, which is not possible. So, we have to go symptomatic, go toward the therapeutic measurements and give the therapeutic symptomatic relief to the patient initially, then the long term intranasal steroids, particularly in the seasonal variations like that. And lastly, the surgery. I think the time is already there. It's finish. Okay, 5 minutes more. So, allergens to avoid, irritants to avoid, oral antihistamines and intranasal corticosteroids. It is written primary treatment for nasal obstruction, but usually it is also to be given for a longer period, and it may and may not be effective, you are not sure. So, some of the time you may have to give the oral steroids, particularly in the polyposis cases or the post-operative period. Then combination, violated nasal decongestants, oxymetazoline and xylometazoline, locally or orally, locally, it is not orally, then others. So, now the surgery. Lately, particularly I will like to give 2 minutes on this topic, that polyposis and septal deviation or the enteroconal polyp and all those, it's good. But for the allergic rhinitis, I had done in a number of cases about 15-20 years before, when I got the lasers. Before that, cautery, electrocautery submucosal diathermy was being done on the inferior turbinates. Later on, it came to the coblation or in the cryo, then laser comes. So, we used to do fiber, diode fiber in the submucosal thing and did it, and that patients usually the inferior turbinate shrinks and allergy is very much relieved because of the decreased surface area. And lately now it is advised for the turbinoplasty, microdebridor assisted turbinate, small turbinate reduction, we can say. In basic theory or the psychology is, we should preserve the normal mucosa. Cautery, coblation, laser, all they destroy the normal mucosal function. But the turbinoplasty, it reduces the size or thing, but it preserves the normal healthy mucosa, and normal function of the turbinate is maintained and patient is relieved of the allergy up to a great extent. I do not say 100% cure, no, but it is to the great extent. I think it is enough. Thank you. Thank you very much for the patience listening. Thank you very much. Any questions if anybody want to ask?
My question is that how long Monteclast can be given along with the levocetirizine?
The chest physicians use has been started before us, and it is said that even 6 months, 1 year, it is no problem, no side effects. For the allergic rhinitis, I do not say that my experience is very good with the Montelukast, because effect is not that much.
So, there is one question from Dr. Subhash from Allahabad. As per your experience, sir, which is the nasal corticosteroid is more effective in allergic rhinitis? Is it fluticasone or mometasone, and why?
The intranasal steroid, if we go, the best is budesonide, but it has been withdrawn. For the pediatric age group of patient, the mometasone is the best because its absorption is hardly 0.05, and for the adults the fluticasone is better.
Excuse me, sir.
Two more questions from Dehradun, Dr. Vinesh, from Dr. Vinesh Dehradun. One thing is there any role of genetics in allergic rhinitis? And the second question is, sir, is there any new trend considering the pollution, the increased pollution which we see right now?
I do not know about the genetic because it is a research thing, but for the pollution, yes, we have to control the pollution. I do not know how much is the masks which are available in the market prevent the pollution, because their pores size is very big. So, it is not controlling any pollution, but certainly for our home the fresh air or the pollution control systems, they may be effective.
Sir, I want to know, in an acute phase, if we give Monteclast with levocetirizine or we should give Monteclast with fexofenadine, and it takes, as per you said, the Monteclast with levocetirizine, it takes about 8 to 10 days to start its
Yes.
work. So, for 8 and 10 days, what for acute thing, what should we do?
Yes. for the acute phase, as I already told you, patient comes to us and he wants the relief from the acute symptom.
Yes.
So, antihistaminic type 1, first generation or second generation, particularly chlorpheniramine maleate, along with the decongestant orally, as well as the decongestant oxymetazoline and xylometazoline nasal drops. That has to be given, and then switch over to the levocetirizine montelukast, or simultaneously you start both the things. Then withdraw the first generation antihistamines and continue with the third generation montelukast levocetirizine or montelukast fexofenadine.
What is the ideal age for the tonsillectomy?
Ideal age, there is no ideal age, it is the requirement. The incidence of tonsillectomy has reduced tremendous because of the good antibiotics and the good awareness or the education. So, even I have operated 2-year-old patients because they were having stridor, very much hypertonsil, tonsils, kissing tonsils, and very much hypertrophied adenoids.
Okay.
So, it's not many,
Age is
but
no-
preferably because the function, antibody production, function of the tonsil adenoid is up to the age of 3. From 3 to 4 years, it gets reduced and stops. After the 4 years, adenoids and tonsils they shrink, and by the age of 12 years, they are almost rudimentary. So, preferably, if not very much symptomatic patient, then you do after 4 years. But in some of the patients, in 2 years, you may require it.
Okay. Sir, the patient normally come with the complaint that after coming from the flight, they get their ear problem or earache or their blockage. So, what should we do or for preparation, for precaution?
Yes. Previously, you must know that the previous long back, the flights used to give one chocolate or
Yes, toffee. Yes,
toffee
yes.
at the time of takeoff.
Yes.
Because by this chewing movements,
Uh-huh.
the eustachian tube close and open, and this prevents the negative pressure formation in the middle ear.
Oh.
So it is important that we must ask the patient first, no cold. If cold is there, take the medicine antihistaminic decongestant 1 hour before.
Okay.
Second, take chocolates with you and chew during the
Chocolate
takeoff
or
and
chewing
landing.
gum also can be work.
Chewing gum, chocolate, like that. And third is, if there is a slight negative pressure in the middle ear, you can do Valsalva and open it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
One more question from Ambala. Role of immunotherapy from your own personal experience perspective.
I am still, when we started, it was the Histaglobe and like that, and different non-specific immuno agents were there, but I am not using it because I used all those and I am not satisfied. But lately there are oral immunotherapy is also available internationally, that is not FDA approved in the India, but they are in the things, but I have no experience about it. Thank you. There is not many companies have come with it, but I have not seen. No, I have not seen any benefit. I have used in few patients. Yes, I used in a number of patients.
What is the schedule so you are following for that?
Initially at that time it was one every month.
One injection every month.
Yeah.
One injection?
One. Heart
Yes.
And after that 3 months, then after 6 months, and then after 1
I
year.
saw one description from one of the colleagues that it was like getting every week and they
No,
continue.
which used to come, it was 3 injections in 3 months, then give a gap of 3 months, then again 1 injection, then give a gap of 6 months, then again 1 injection, boosted.
What is the role of colostrum which is coming up as a immunity booster? Colostrum.
Colostrum is certainly, it is the best thing, it must be.
I think it should have some role in this.
Yes, yes. It gives immunity.
This is specially for the webcast location. The session Sir, only one announcement for webcast location because they are now confused. Sir, you can discuss, sir. Only for the webcast locations. This is for the webcast locations. Doctors, the session is over and thank you so much for participating. This is for the webcast location. The session is over and thank you so much, doctor, for participating.